Today on Life on Air, sexy and sultry former college sports star Callie Bundy opens up about what it's like to make a transition from sports to TV hosting.
I don't think I owned a, pair of heels into like my mid-20s. So I'm like a recovering tomboy now.
Plus, she describes the audition tape that landed her a hosting gig overseas.
I remember I grabbed the camera and my sister and headed down to a sports bar and talked about weather and football. And I think the opening scene, I had her tackle me in a helmet.
Connecticut's own Callie Bundy, next on Life on Air. Hey everybody, welcome to Life on Air. This is Tim Tialdo, and you've reached the podcast for the TV hosting industry. My job, of course, is to connect you with the experts and to give you all the information you need to become the best host you can be. Now, we're just a couple of weeks into the launch of my book here, and it's going great. Got to be honest with you. I appreciate all of you who have bought the book and inquired about the book, and even those of you who have contacted me personally to ask questions. It's really going well, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it, you just go to hostyourowntvshow.com. Not only can you get the book, but I'm going to give you some free video training and also a free ebook that talks about the fundamentals of being on camera, because to be a TV host, you got to have certain things down before you ever even try to do that. So it talks a little bit about that. And then also, I started a LinkedIn group. I talked about that in one of my previous podcasts, but if you haven't been on LinkedIn, I started a group just called TV Hosts. It's strictly for our industry, so join it, because we're going to be on there talking about all kinds of things, doing some polls, and obviously you can network with each other. So once again, go to LinkedIn to the TV Hosts group. I'm very excited today to have a guest on that I've gotten to know through the business. We actually just kind of get to know each other through the network, and she's really good on camera. And the first time I saw her reel, I just said, this girl lights it up, and she's great. You know, she refers to herself as a tomboy, and I think one of the best descriptions I've ever heard in my life, she calls herself living crack, which is great. I love it. She's from the Northeast. She's involved in the fitness industry right now, and she's actually competing. So she's certainly showing the looks as well as the talent. Welcome, Callie Bundy, to the podcast. How are you, Callie?
I'm very good, Tim. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your career, because you have something here in your bio that I was reading about that I didn't know, and I'd love to hear more about, and that's that you hosted a show, I believe, in Japan. Is that what it was?
Exactly. It was actually mobile phone video that we were doing, and it was a little bit before it had kind of hit here in the U.S., so it was like a test market. And it was produced for the U.S. market, but all of the production was done in Chiba, Japan, which is right outside of Tokyo.
So how do you get involved with something like that? I mean, where did you start, and how did you get to the Japan job?
Yeah, it was actually, one of the first jobs I had, and it was just kind of me not one side you could say maybe not really knowing any better, but I was looking for on-air positions, and I had come across that. I don't even remember where I came across it. It was on the internet, but I don't remember what site it was at all. And they said, send in an audition tape. We're new lifestyle weather segments. So send us your best stuff, but we want it to be funny. So I remember I grabbed the camera and my sister and headed down to a sports bar and talked about weather and football. And I think the opening scene, I had her tackle me in a helmet. So I sent that off, and they said, great, we'd like to bring you in for an audition and an interview. So they're actually based out of San Francisco. So I flew out there, and they said, we'd like to give you the position. And I remember going home and telling my parents, and they're like, so you're going to go to Japan for a video job. And my mom, I think, thought maybe I was going to be sold off in some kind of weird adult slave trade. But it all worked out, actually, yeah. So a month later, I was in Tokyo, and we were producing video.
Well, that's awesome. Now, I've had a chance to watch your reel a few times, and you've got this great confidence about you, especially around guys, and you refer to yourself as a tomboy. Talk a little bit about your background, kind of how you developed that presence and the personality that you've become.
It's definitely a tomboy. It's just always been who I was, so that was just, my innate self, but I played sports my whole life, soccer, basketball, softball. I played softball in college. Probably a quick way to sum it up in college, I was either going to practice, coming from practice, going to a game, going to the gym, and I always had a hat on. And I remember one time I was out and somebody saw me and they were like, hey, you're the girl that always wears the red hat. I always wondered what you looked like. So that was just something that came naturally to me. Just always loved sports, ate it up. I don't think I owned a, pair of heels into like my mid-20s. So I'm like a recovering tomboy now, but
recovering.
It's just that I've always just naturally got along better with guys too. Female athletes are a different breed of their own, I like to call them alpha females. They're kind of a hybrid, but so I just always got along with them better. And then, oddly enough now, I do the fitness competitions, which is funny because it's all about being very feminine on stage. And that made me have to work on that part of myself.
And I bet backstage you kind of slap him around a little bit. You're like, look, I will whoop your butt.
I do. I've always said, I'm like, wouldn't it be awesome if like we ended and then like we had like, even if nobody wanted to go for like a physical contact, like, some football or something, at least we could like, have a wiffle ball game or, wrestling match, like, listen, you may have taken first in the class, but now let's really see like who the real athlete is.
Now it's on. That's great. That's great. So it sounds like you got quite an athletic background, and you said you're doing the fitness competitions now. Was TV hosting something you always wanted to do? How did you fall into it?
And I definitely fell into it. That's a good way to put it. It's not something I always want to do. Growing up, it was all about sports for me. That's really all I cared about. And I come from a very traditional family where literally, from my father, my grandfather, everyone is in the medical field. They're doctors, nurses, literally everyone. So, their career path, so to speak, was like, now you go to college and, you pick out what you want to do. And to me, I was like, oh, I can go to college? Cool. Play softball another 4 years. So I did not know what I wanted to do at all. And I remember mentioning, that I wanted to do communications, and, that was a big no-no. It was like, no, you pick a real, a real field. So I went into, business marketing, and, it was kind of after college that I realized I had no desire to do anything in this quote unquote real world that I've been kind of forced into. So I went back to school, and for broadcasting, and that's when, I started to realize there was this whole other world. And that's when, I tried, the anchoring, the reporting, and that wasn't me. And then I found TV hosting, and I was like, yes.
Wait, you just brought up a really good point, and it's something I just wrote a blog on it not too long ago, and that's that somebody said to you, go get a real job, like TV hosting isn't a real job. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you think it's a real job?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's a difficult one to understand if you aren't in it, because, people, there's not a whole lot of security or guarantees, I would say, in the TV hosting world. But whereas in, quote unquote, the real world, that, people like to label it as, you can go out and you can, for the most part, get a job. And, if you show up and you do the right thing, you have that security. So I think, a lot of people in the world that I'm in, that's the way they view things. So for, like when I came back from Japan, they're like, okay, are you going to get, a real job now? And I'm like, what are you?
Well, you mentioned some of the challenges that, that go along with trying to be a TV host. And I know that a lot of us have dealt with those. So let's talk a little bit about what you've gone through, because you're a beautiful girl. You're an athletic girl. You're a confident girl. You know how to use your own talents and personality to get attention from other people. What are some of the big challenges that you have had to overcome since you've got into the industry? A
big part of it for me was, the family aspect of it. We have a very close family, so they're very, concerned with what you're doing, in a good way. So again, just their, lack of support in wanting to pursue that field, and, understanding that, things like, again, I come from a medical family. They're like, well, what are you going to do for health insurance? Well, what do you mean you're going to, do, this job so you can go do that? They're having to take certain positions for flexibility so that you can have the ability to go and do other things, that you wanted to do. I would say that was the biggest thing, and kind of, convincing them that they are quote unquote, real jobs. It's hard for people to really understand, like, oh, you went on an audition. What does that mean?
So what kind of jobs did you find yourself, doing on the side to make sure that you could participate in auditions and things like that?
A lot of different things. That's for sure. They all, a lot of them revolved around, like alcohol promotions.
Bartending seems to be a big one.
Yeah, bartending is definitely a big one. I went more of the promotional route. Pretty much all different kinds of alcohol positions. They're the most flexible.
Because you're such an athlete, right? Because
exactly. Exactly.
I bet that really helps the fitness competitions, Callie.
Tons of free products. Exactly. It's exactly what I want.
Any of those jobs you ever had to do where you were just almost embarrassed? I mean, did you have to be a cashier at a grocery store? I mean, just those things that you're just like, I can't believe I'm doing this and I'm 25, 30 years old.
Probably the best one was I rotated deli counters.
Beautiful.
Like, when you go to the deli and there's all the deli display inside the counter and the glass. That was my job, was to go in and rotate the deli counters.
So kind of like a merchandiser for a retail store, except you were making the meat look good.
Exactly.
Well, you were fulfilling the protein needs for your fitness competitions as well, right?
Well, yeah, you don't want all that sodium and nitrates, involved in there. Not necessarily the cleanest protein source, but yeah. So it was pretty comical.
Well, you've moved on from meat counters to, I believe you covered the Olympia competition for a fitness magazine recently as a host. So kind of talk about where you're going now, what we can expect in the future for Callie Bundy. Yeah,
that was actually a really, really cool opportunity for me, because I think I can speak for a lot of hosts when you say sometimes you cover things that you might not be the most passionate about. You might take it because it is a gig, and it does show someone like, okay, well, look, I can, do red carpet, or I can do man on street, or I can, do sit down interviews. You want to show that spectrum. So you might take a job because it's something that shows another skill of yours that you're not necessarily the most passionate about. So, being that I was competing in the fitness industry this year, I got an opportunity through muscular development to go and do the female coverage at the Olympia in Las Vegas, which, for those of you that don't know about the Olympia, I know you do, Tim, but it's one of, if not the biggest fitness event in the industry.
Yeah, I would say it and the Arnold are definitely the two tops.
Right. So it was really cool to be able to go and, do, again, it was all the female coverage I did. So, to talk and interview, I know Nicole Wilkins, I got to interview her. Jamie Baird, Natalia Mello, who won Miss Bikini Olympia. So to interview, all the pro athletes in that field was really cool and definitely a huge honor. And then they let me have a little fun with it, where again, my personality, I'm never serious, like to joke around, love humor. So I got a segment called The Gun Show, where we went to Meet the Olympians event.
I can only imagine.
Yes, we had some very awesome conversations with, like Branch Warren, asking him about how he uses his tube sock during his tanning process, if you know what I mean.
Gosh, I'll have to see that. You have to send that to me.
Yes, yeah, I definitely will. There's 3 segments to it. We had, so much footage, and it was so great. The athletes were super cool about it. I was waiting for somebody to bite my head off with some of the stuff I was asking. But everybody had a really good time with it, and I think it's because everybody always asks them such serious questions. Everybody asks them about the training and the diet, and, they probably almost get sick of talking about it.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a lot of fun and a huge honor, but it was really very cool for me too, because it's something, again, that I am passionate about.
So outside of the camera, should we look to see you on the Olympia stage soon, or is that one of your goals?
Yeah, we'll see. That's definitely a lofty goal. I think a long term, yes. Short term right now, for me, it would just be focusing on the NPC competitions and, keep bringing consistency to the stage and, earning the pro card first. And then, once you have that, it's, a whole nother battle of the same thing of, showing up and being consistent and, getting better and better each time. And hopefully as an end goal, yeah, that would be great.
Well, I certainly wish you the best of luck, and we're going to be cheering for you. And I just love what you're doing and hosting. I love your humor and your style and the way that you just kind of go off the cuff. And like you talked about, just have some fun with it and make people laugh. And I know that's going to carry you to great heights. So, Callie, thanks so much for being here, okay?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And one last quick note I would like to say for, all the hosts out there who are kind of the same position. I'm sure there's lots of people don't really get what they're doing. You're not necessarily surrounded by a lot of hosts that you can bounce ideas off of. I had the chance, I bought your book, I read it, and it was, like sitting down with your best friend and being able to like, oh, people feel like this too. And, that's great. And it's filled with awesome tips. It's really like a step-by-step, to just keep going and the right way to do it. So I recommend everyone to get their hands on a copy.
Well, that was an awesome plug. Thank you so much. That's very sweet of you. Thanks so much, Callie.
You're welcome.
Hey, folks, don't forget to tune in next week. My guest will be Alex Shankman. He's one of the co-founders of Gotcast.com, and he is now an agent at the Kaplan-Staler Agency. So if you're looking for an agent, this guy is going to be able to give you all the tips on how to best go about that. So once again, that's Alex Shankman on next week's podcast. Thanks again to my guest, Callie Bundy, for being on the show today. She's awesome. We're looking forward to seeing what she does in the future. And folks, as I say all the time, the only way to predict your future is to go out and create it. Now go do it. We'll see you next week.